someone want to text Jim and tell him if he's not, in case he forgot?
I can do that.
Okay, yeah. I had to reorganize all these Zoom meetings into one list, so I knew. I had like 8 o'clock, a 9 o'clock, a 10 o'clock.
Yeah, I just got off one.
Jim is coming on right now.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Trying to register for a class at PCC. We have to talk, Erica.
Okay.
We're certified at USC.
Well, Tony, I can sympathize with you. I have had to make
Oh
many
my
calls.
God.
It's not easy. David, I just sympathize with those students because I
Something has to
think
be
it was easy.
You know, I went to Clara because she takes class. She says, Tony, I just gave up and went to Olivia, Cynthia Oliva. And she said, that's what you have to do. Erica,
Okay,
something
so
has to be
that's
done.
not good news. That
No,
is not good information.
I have to contact student services every time.
Erica, it has to be made. There's a lot of material. There's too much. And it has to be
It
condensed.
needs to be more of a step-by-step process. And it's not as intuitive as it could be.
Finally said, I'm
You
going to
got
go to
that,
public
Alex?
school.
We got to, and David, I think we'll need this to give this feedback to Dr. Olivo
Yeah.
and her staff.
So it might be some things we can talk about at the retreat.
Yeah.
Talk about equity and how we can make some improvements.
I'm
So
glad you agree, Linda.
yeah. Is David joining us at the retreat?
Usually the student trustee doesn't, but he can.
Yeah.
I'm
Jim, do
happy
you
to.
have a problem with David joining us at the retreat?
No.
Yeah,
I
that's
think David should
great.
join us. What
Yeah.
do you think, David?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I probably won't be doing anything that day anyways.
Hey, that's the second day of school. I hope you're doing something.
Oh,
Too funny. Well, David, your voice is always welcome. So yeah, I think it'd be great to have the student there.
Okay, so who chairs this committee?
I believe I'm the chair. Okay,
Awesome, Linda.
so do we have any public comment?
No public comment today.
Okay, no public comments on non-agenda items. So statewide ballot initiatives. So who's gonna kick that off?
We have Dale.
Dale, yay Dale.
Good morning.
Good
Dale,
morning.
you look like you're in
Morning, Dale.
Hawaii. You have a little tatami mat. And
No, I use this because the kids have ransacked the whole house. So, so this is my protection, and it saves you from seeing the mess that's behind me. So,
Okay.
so there's going to be 12 ballot initiatives on the November election. And 2 of them merit particular attention for PCC. One is Proposition 15, which taxes commercial and industrial properties except for agriculture. And it taxes these properties at market value rather than the purchase price. So it changes, essentially changes Proposition 13. What it does, by doing that and going to market value, it will raise in the first year somewhere in the neighborhood of between $8 billion and $12 billion. Of that amount, they've put together a formula where 60% of the money goes to local government and 40% goes to K-14 education. So if there's an $8 billion yield in the first year, it means it goes through Proposition 98 and community colleges get 11%. So that'll be about $350 million that will get to the community colleges. This measure, the supporters are obviously municipal governments, a lot of nonprofit groups, the League of Women Voters, ACLU, are in support of this measure. A number of labor groups are in support of this measure. And the primary opponents are business organizations and anti-taxpayer groups. Right now, the latest campaign reports show that the supporters have raised about $19.4 million for passage. And right now, the opponents have raised $3.1 million for opposition.
Wow.
This doesn't include, however, independent expenditure committees. So as you know, those committees don't really rear its visit or show its visibility until later in the process. I suspect it won't be until after Labor Day, the Labor Day holiday on this. The polling, there has been polls off and on this measure. The latest poll was done by PPIC, the Public Policy Institute of California. They did it during the first week of April, and it showed 53% in support and 47% in opposition. The undecided vote was less than 1%. So that's sort of interesting that people are already pretty, drawn their lines in the sand, as it were, on it. Of course, that could change once the campaign starts in earnest and they start, publicizing this initiative a lot more. Do you want me to go through both of them first and then go for questions, or do you want to? Okay. So the next one of interest that's related to education is Proposition 16. This was also in our earlier incarnation. This is one of the few propositions that went through the legislature and got adopted by the legislature on a two-thirds vote of both houses. It was ACA 5, introduced by Assemblywoman Weber from San Diego. This repeals Proposition 209, where it's specified that the state could not discriminate against or grant preferential treatment to persons based on race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin. And that applied to public employment, public education, and public contracting. So this would repeal Prop 209. The supporters of this initiative thus far are the UC Board of Regents, and the Board of Governors of the California Community Colleges have also supported it. The listed opposition thus far is a group called Students for Fair Admissions. I don't know a lot about the group, but when they filed their opposition, they listed their address as being in Austin, Texas. So I'm not sure. I didn't get a chance to get more information on it prior to this meeting. In terms of campaign and fundraising, there have been no reports filed. I think because the initiative, the constitutional amendment just went through last month. I don't think there's been committees that have been organized in time for the, for them to file reports and file the quarterly reports that are required this time. In addition, there haven't been any statewide polls conducted on this. So it's one of these things that we'll probably know more after, again, probably after Labor Day, once these campaigns start in earnest on it. So those are the two primary initiatives that you should be aware of for right now. We can open up for questions and conversation, so.
One of the outcomes, potential outcomes of this meeting is for this committee to make a recommendation to the full board as to whether or not it wants to take a position on either or both of these bills or, yeah, propositions.
Linda, you're on mute.
Linda, you're muted.
Sorry, no wonder no one was paying attention to anything I was saying. The league and the chancellor's office are both supporting this, and they have already started to send out correspondence. They're already putting together toolkits to support both of these propositions. They did preliminary reach out to the districts to ask for a sign-on to support Proposition 16 and 15. So yeah, I think that this is an opportunity for us to get on board. So the only thing I had on Proposition 15 was I do think that there's an element where they are changing residential, right? If the original homeowner then passes away or releases their property, then it doesn't just automatically get passed to their heirs. It gets reassessed at the new value. Gail, was that?
That's a different proposition.
Okay, so it's not under 15?
No, it's not under this one. I'm trying to get the number for you.
19. That's Proposition 19.
19, yes, Proposition
19,
19.
Okay, yeah, I was on the OC, I was on not the OC, but the Advancing Justice Advocacy Group, and I was wondering when they talked about it, because I didn't think it originally included residential. Okay, so any questions on 15?
Can I just ask Linda?
Yeah.
Is Prop 15 the one that was written by the Attorney General? Really deals with Prop 13, the old.
I don't think it was written by the Attorney General, was it, Dale?
No, but the Attorney General on all the propositions has to write a description of each ballot initiative that appears on the ballot.
But is
So,
this a remake of Prop 13, or is this another one?
it's not, well, it's a change to Prop 13. I don't think it's it's a change. I don't know if a remake is the right characterization, but it is a change to Prop 13.
It closes up the loopholes on commercial property that Prop 13 didn't cover.
Right.
Jim,
Mhm.
your hand up.
Tony, this is sometimes referred to as the split roll,
Yes, yes.
meaning that homes would still be subject to Prop 13 and commercial properties would not.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's also sometimes advocated for as the schools first or California schools first
Yes.
proposition.
Mhm.
Yeah. Any questions?
Really quick.
Alex?
Dale, what's the threshold for passage on both of these?
Majority,
Oh, okay, great.
yeah.
David, any questions?
Not at the moment.
Jim?
Jim has another one.
Jim, I'm not
So-
muted, Jim.
So for Prop 16, what are the practical implications for community colleges?
Oh, my gosh.
I think I understand what they are for admissions into four-year schools, but how about for community college?
Okay, so we're done with discussion on 15. Nobody else has anything else? Okay, so Prop 16. Yeah, Dale?
Well, I think, so a couple of things. Community colleges are open access. So
Mhm.
that doesn't change, as far as I can see, I don't think that changes anything in that
It
component.
probably changes it more on the employment side.
Yeah,
That,
I would say employment and on
Yeah.
contracting.
Yeah.
So one issue prior to the repeal of Proposition 209 that governments were looking at were on the public contracting side was looking at set-asides for women and minority-owned businesses, particularly in the area of bonds. When local governments were issuing bonds, and the state, as well as the state government, they were looking into a target, if you will, for women and minority-owned businesses to be eligible for participation in contracting or preference points or things like that. So I think in those areas, there's a potential for that. So, but I think it doesn't directly affect the education side of the equation.
I think for one of the things that Prop 209 did was it prohibited collection of demographic data on the students, especially for the 4 years. So the UCs and CSUs are now going to be able to collect data on the students, which, it was one of the things that we had a hard time on when we were advocating for ACA 5, then ACA 5, now Prop 16, is we really couldn't find enough data, and a lot of that was because organizations, institutions were prohibited from collecting that data. So I think this is going to help us overall collect the data that is needed to really focus in both on statistics that affect employment, but also our student outcomes. Although, as we know, we were accepting everyone, so we did have some data. We did have data on that. But Prop 209, I think the group that we noted was the biggest, most greatly impacted by the lack of affirmative action, and were women. So we found that the largest gap was women were not achieving both in fair employment opportunities as well as equal pay.
I think the other, upside too is that we need to really disaggregate some of the federal bigger categories. For example, our college has a growing number of Armenian students. But if you look at how they're classified, I mean, we do have the disaggregated data piece when it comes to students applying to California Community College through CCC Apply. But on the employment side of the house, if I hire somebody who's Armenian, which matches our growing population, it says I hired a white person. And that's something that we have to be able to disaggregate, because there are those subpopulations, even though I don't like using that term, but there are subpopulations that it's important to say, yes, we have this growing community. And, you know, and we could take it with API. On the student side, we have however number of categories. Somebody can say they're Cambodian, they can say they're Vietnamese. But on the employment side, we hired somebody who was API. And it's important if you're like Long Beach City College and you have a huge Cambodian population, then your hiring statistics should reflect that, but there's no way to match the two up. And so that's what I'm hoping comes out of this is we need to be able to break it down in ways that we're not really allowed to at this point.
Yeah, I agree, Erica. I mean, this was a huge issue for the API caucus when we pushed for this, when we finally got it through the system, that we're now disaggregating data across multiple populations. So I think African Americans have expanded to like 11 groups. APIs are now expanded. We disaggregated the Native Americans, which had never been disaggregated before.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think these are important issues. So as Dale knows, when the hearings, when they had the hearings both at Assembly and the Senate, there were a number of Asian American groups who were against this because they see it as harmful to their students, their children getting in. They see it as being used as a quota.
Yeah.
And we, even though we didn't have a lot of data, we were able to show that Asian American students were not helped by the elimination of affirmative action. And so that's what we're trying to tell our groups. But many of these Asian American groups, you know, the parents are first generation, they're hard, very set. Their whole focus is getting their child in the best educational opportunities they can. So they see this as not being helpful to their students. And so they've threatened legislators who have voted for this, particularly API legislators. They've threatened to go up against them in their elections. So we do see that there's pushback. The Chancellor's Office has put together toolkits. I've asked the caucuses to also put together toolkits across their group. So I do think because we are in a high API population area, we may see that pushback. I've seen on social media, friends of ours, I mean, people we know from our community have said they will vote against anyone who votes for this. Wow. Yeah, and these are good friends of ours, people we all know. So I do think there's going to be some pushback, but I think they're both important. And I think we should support them. Any discussion, questions? Tony? David? Jim?
I'll chime in on Prop 15. It's for K-14 education, which certainly is good. I'm probably going to abstain on any vote, whether it's in this committee or in our board meeting, because I am a commercial property owner. And I originally came here from the state of Illinois, where we did not have Prop 13 type protections for real estate, homes and businesses. And I saw the impact that it made to property owners, where the cities, counties, states could just jack up the property taxes without any limits whatsoever. The flip side is that you do get an inequity in Prop 13. And that inequity is two homeowners living right next door to each other. One bought 30 years ago for
Yeah.
100,000. The other bought yesterday for $1 million. And those are sometimes the numbers we see, both using the same amount of city services, et cetera, but the taxes are different. So that's a inequity that's inherent in Prop 13. Personally, I would feel better if the proponents didn't, in my view, cynically exempt residential from this tax increase. And I know why they didn't, because if they did, every homeowner would vote against it. But to treat commercial property owner taxes differently than residential is just, in my view, a cynical way of more taxes on business. But look, everyone's got their own opinion. It is for 40% of it's for K-14 education, which is good, and we need to spend more money on K-14. I'm just kind of articulating the pluses and minuses. As I said, I would just abstain as a commercial property owner, but I wanted to just get some of the pros and cons of Prop 15 out there.
Jim, I respect you for saying that, because I'm still looking at this proposition myself. So my suggestion would be for this to go to the board without any recommendation.
Well, that certainly, you can do that. You can just put it, so would you say put a resolution on the next board agenda that supports it and then see if the board votes for or against it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we could do that. Yeah, I am in favor of this. I was a little concerned myself, but I worked for the LA County Schools District back when Proposition 13 passed, and I saw such a huge difference in what
Mhm.
the reduction in the budget was to schools, where we went from one of the top educating states to one of the lowest. I think we were ranked like 49. Now I think we were just above Mississippi. Now I think we're like 47 or something in terms of per pupil funding. I mean, I think it's, and I think where you see the disparity in what commercial properties were being assessed versus what residential properties were being assessed, I think it's, yeah, it was a disparity. So I don't even mind. I mean, I remember the senior citizens getting kicked out of their homes because they couldn't pay their property taxes.
Right.
And I don't want to see that happen either. So I don't care if my next door neighbor who's 90 years old is paying less than I'm paying, but I do care that a multi-million-dollar company is paying less than what I'm paying. So
Mhm.
yeah, I do think there should be some fairness. So yeah, I don't have a problem for this to go before the board with no recommendation, but
Okay.
discuss.
Yeah, and Linda, to reinforce your comments on funding, we're 47, 48, 49. We bounce around, but it's near the bottom. And those other states that are at the bottom, their cost of living in those states is lower as well. And so when you adjust for cost of living, we're probably 50th.
Yeah,
We need,
yeah. I like to say we're at least above Mississippi, but what the heck?
No, we are, but again, when you adjust for cost of living, it's a lot less expensive for a teacher to live or an administrator to live anywhere in Mississippi versus anywhere in California.
Yeah.
So adjusted for cost of living, we're probably at the bottom. We're probably 50.
Yeah.
Very sad.
Yes, has not been a great story for California education. Okay, are we willing to move forward with Proposition 15, let's see, 16 with a recommendation to support to the board?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, Linda, as a API yourself, and I did listen to what you had to say, and I'm I'm torn because I think there's merit to the proposition, but I also see the concerns of the opposition. And
Yeah.
I'd kind of be
Well,
interested in what your thoughts are.
yeah, so we have two trustees who are APIs, and I think you kind of generally know the feelings. So, well, you know my feelings. So I am for Proposition 16, and I think many of the API organizations that back in 1998, was it 96, Dale, that
96.
Prop 96 when Prop 209 went
Yes.
forward, did not support, support the elimination of affirmative action because they did see that there was a lot of rhetoric about API students not getting accepted into universities because universities thought there were too many of us. And then it was perceived that students of a different color with fewer qualifications were being accepted over our students. You don't see that today. I think the discussion and the conversation is very different. I think almost most API organizations, large API organizations, are supporting this. They see that it's that lack of affirmative action has not been the cause of keeping our students out. It's actually been because we don't have affirmative action that we're not able to advance in the workplace. We hit ceilings. I know we don't see that in the community college levels because Dale had done some preliminary work, but we see that in other areas. And so I think that you're going to see fewer, you are going to see a vocal API group come out against this. So I'll just say Ken Way has publicly posted that he will make sure that he votes against anyone who votes for this proposition. So, I mean, you know, and Ken's a friend of a lot of us, but, you know,
Yeah.
so be it. Yeah, so be it. But, you know, many of our other API elected officials are still moving forward. Polly Lowe, from Mayor of Rosemead, is supporting this. So unfortunately, Ed Chow, our assembly member who represents half of our district, abstained from the vote. And a lot of that was because of the pressure. Many of the groups that are against this, or some of the strong vocal groups who are against this, are in San Gabriel Valley. They're in San Diego and they're in the Silicon Valley. So Ed felt the pressure of this. But I think that if you go back and you look at Evan Lowe, who made some very strong statements in the assembly, one of the things he did was he chastised Assemblymember Weber for not reaching out to the API legislators to ask for support. But then at the end of the day, he did say, I'm going to support it because it's the right thing to do. After some discussion, all of the API legislature came out and they supported this. So, so the majority of them did. So they are going to, I think people are going to stand up, and we in the API community know that we have to have the backs of the API legislators who voted for this because it was the right thing to do.
Well, since you're sending the other one forward without a recommendation, just as the whole full board can vote, you could do the same thing with this one.
Yeah.
You know, we
I
could
would-
draft up a support statement and then have the board vote.
I would like to do that. I'd like to speak to my state senator before I.
Yeah.
Yeah, Susan actually, you know, so I'm on the Women's Caucus too. I think Susan abstained from supporting 15, but I think she supports 16.
Okay.
You're talking about Susan Rubio?
Yeah.
Yeah, she voted for it.
Yeah, she voted for 16, but she abstained from 15, correct?
Well, 15 was an initiative. It wasn't before the legislature. So it was a
Okay.
signature campaign. So 16 was the only one that that went to a vote of the legislature.
So I was on the Advancing Justice Advocacy Group, and I think when we called, we spoke to Susan's office, and she did not take a position on 15 yet because she does represent a number of commercial property owners, corporate property owners.
Yeah.
Any other? Yeah, so I don't have a problem going forward with this without recommendation and let the board discuss it. Any other discussion on this? Okay, What else do we have?
Nothing on propositions, but I think the next topic is legislation. Excuse me, let me just turn this off.
Okay.
Sorry. Is it okay to talk about legislation a little bit? So let me just give you a general backdrop of what's happening here. As you may know, the legislature was on summer recess, and just when they were ready to go back into session, two members of the legislature and a couple of staff people contracted the COVID-19 virus. So they closed down the Capitol building, and they were doing extensive scrubbing of the building, and that delayed their return by a couple of weeks. So when they came back, they have a pretty big challenge in front of them because under the Constitution, they have to adjourn by August 31st. The Constitution doesn't give any flexibility on that. And yet in the Senate, there's over 500 bills that the Assembly passed that's in their House. The Assembly has only 200 because there's fewer senators, right? So the Assembly workload is manageable. They could get that out and pass the bills and send it back to the Senate on a timely basis. The Senate is the problem. The 500 bills is a huge workload to process in 5 weeks' time. And they were concerned, the Senate was so concerned about that they started looking for ways to ration the bills and try to identify bills that would be easy to pass out and get consensus with and adopt through a consent calendar, and the ones that they anticipated that may be less controversial, so there'd be less floor debate that would take place. So last week, they started announcing that they were not going to hear certain bills due to controversy or whatever. Unfortunately, they didn't bother to talk to the Assembly about what they were doing. And the Assembly got word of these actions at the same time the media and public did. And the Assembly members got very upset and they started protesting and fighting back. So what this has created is sort of a chaotic situation where now there's a lot of fighting going on between the houses, and it's reached a breaking point where yesterday Speaker Rendon announced that he had canceled today's hearings in the Assembly. So he wasn't going to hear any of the Senate bills today, and he said he was going to meet with the pro tem of the Senate, Senator Atkins, to see if they could work this out. If it were a normal session, and these things have happened before where there's fights between the Assembly and the Senate, if it were a normal session and we'd have 8 to 10 weeks to get through session, this could be ironed out on a timely basis. But we only have about 4.5 or 5 weeks to do this. So it's not clear how this is all going to sort itself out. And people say, well, why don't you just hold a special session? But you can't hold a special session and take up where you left off. You have to start everything all over again, meaning that you introduce a bill. So let's say AB 10, whatever it is, does X, Y, and Z. You can't say, well, let's just pick up where we left off in the Senate. You have to reintroduce AB 10 as AB 10X. You have to wait for 30 days for public viewing. Then you do the hearing in the first house on policy basis, then the hearing in appropriations, then goes to the floor. So you have to start the whole process, and that if you take it to its full logical conclusion, it will take another 4 or 5 months to do. And that's just not only practical, but it's also in view of the many members of the legislature, dangerous, because they're trying to get out and avoid being in the legislature as long as possible because they don't want to spread the virus. So, and the public, and they're still under jurisdiction of the Sacramento Public Health Director too. So, so you've got all those forces at play. So I give you that as a backdrop, only to let you know that I've got a couple of bills to share with you, but I have no idea what's going to happen to them. So I know their priorities and they're of interest to you. But I just want you to know that we don't know what the ultimate outcome will be of this as we go forward. So with that backdrop, there's just a couple of things I wanted to let you know about for information and to possibly take a position on. One, more than anything, I wanted to let you know about the CSU Ethnic Studies Bill, AB 1460 by Assemblywoman Weber, who used to be, or I think she still is a faculty member at San Diego State University. It requires a 3-unit course in ethnic studies as a graduation requirement. Last week, as you know, the CSU trustees adopted an ethnic studies and a social justice requirement. So a student would not have to take ethnic studies, but they could take a social justice requirement. Both Assemblymember Weber and the Black Caucus still prefers the passage of the ethnic studies bill. Their concern is that this social justice requirement really dilutes the impact that ethnic studies could have as a graduation requirement. There is a similar requirement at Chico State right now, where Chico State has a cultural studies, ethnic studies requirement. And what they found in the implementation of that requirement is the academic senate threw everything, including the kitchen sink, as what qualifies for cultural studies. So they put in art history classes, they put a child development class, they use there's an American history class, which when you look at the course description has no mention of ethnic studies or ethnic minorities at all. So the fear of the Black Caucus is that you're just diluting the impact of the ethnic studies requirement.
Dale,
Yeah.
Dale, do you know, is this actually an additional class, or is it that one of the existing general education courses must also fulfill this requirement?
Both the trustees' proposal and the Weber bill is an additional class.
So that would take their general education from like 49 units up to 52, because,
Right. Or
is that
unless
right,
they,
Tony? Because that's,
yeah.
it's
Yeah, you're
49
right.
and
Glad you
then,
added that.
Or they could peel back another general ed requirement too. They don't
yeah,
have,
but that's,
yeah, but that's a different politic, right?
yeah,
Yeah, I
wow.
thought. So the other thing,
CSU, that's the CSU bill, right? Which is
Yeah,
different
that's
than
the
what
CSU policy that they
yeah,
adopted.
they're different than the community college one.
Right, but the reason I'm asking is because it impacts how we advise students in breadth requirements.
Right.
Because if they're going to get certified that they've done a GETSI and they've met all the breadth requirements, then is it, and they only take a certain amount with us because 9 of their general education units have to be at the upper level. So that's why it's significant. Is this something that's
Right.
inclusive of what they do or not?
Yeah.
That's a good point, Erica, because I was wondering the other day, I think I wrote to you, I was wondering the impact it would have on PCC if this is a 100 or 200 level course, because you'd have to start offering.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
we have a lot of them, but the question is, do you advise students into an additional 3 units?
I know.
Because if you do, it blows out of the water all those ADTs.
Yeah, right.
The ADTs blown out of the water. I mean, we would have to go back and redo every single one of those, because the number of units that are in the majors, that are in the major, are designed to balance out with what's in the breadth requirements. And so that's significant.
Another thing too, Erica, is what I was thinking about is in all of our departments, particularly in like journalism and communications, we have ethnic studies courses already. And then now we're adding another one.
Right.
And then I also, I've been fighting GE my entire professional life at the university, because we have to really look at all these GEs, and some of the departments exist just because there's a GE. Philosophy wouldn't exist today, I don't think, as a major. And And we have to fight with them because we believe in
Yeah.
communications, which has 4,000 majors, should have more GE, you know?
Right.
And I push, we should have courses in media literacy so people know what's going on at CNN and Fox and what's the truth, you know? So I have real problems with this whole thing, but I know my president is eating it up and he wants it, so.
Yeah, so this got discussed also among at the triple CT table. So it sounds like we would support it if it were not an additional
Yeah,
graduation requirement.
I'm okay if it's an overlay, but to add another 3-unit class to the GE,
Yes.
that those breadth requirements are already 39. This would take it up to 42. And then when they actually get to the CSU, they have to take another 9 that are at the upper level. So
Right.
now general education is 51, a total of 51 units.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
too much.
Yeah, I agree with Erica, because also on top of this, we have accreditation standards we have to meet too that deal with these kind of courses.
Yeah.
I don't know, it just drives me nuts.
Yeah. So this was voted on also at the league, among the league boards. I assume we're going to discuss that same legislation, Dale, the one for community colleges.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
So as companions to this issue, there's a couple of other bills related to this. There's AB 331, a Medina bill, which has a high school requirement for ethnic studies that's sitting in the Senate Appropriations Committee to take a one semester course in ethnic studies to graduate in high school. And that bill was introduced last year and it's sitting in Senate Appropriations. It didn't get out of the Senate last year. So Mr. Medina is still trying to move this forward. And then the bill that you were referencing, Linda, is AB 3310 by Murasuchi. He didn't move it this year, but that was for an ethnic studies course requirement for the community colleges to offer courses in ethnic studies. It was originally modeled after the Weber bill, but that was a spot bill. In the interest of transparency, this is what I was assigned to submit on behalf of the LA Community College District. But for a variety of reasons, they didn't want to move it. They wanted to see what happened to the 1460 first.
Yeah.
Before they moved 3310, because they didn't know, how would it fit into all this stuff. And then secondly, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, there wasn't any time to actually work on the bill. So,
well, again, I think the biggest issue is going to be that if they add that as an additional unit, so that means for the purposes of an ADT, the minimum number of general education units at a community college goes up to 21,
right?
Rather than staying at 18. And part of the issue is that, since 2011, we have worked like dogs to implement SB 1440, to do all the ADTs. And over and over and over again, it was, we don't want people having too many units. We don't want this, we don't want that. If we have to go back, because, there are some colleges out there, Oxnard, when I was there, one of the things they had like the equivalent of an ethnic studies or I can't remember what we called it, requirement that they then left in their local degrees. And so if you got a local degree in psychology, you had to take that class. But if you didn't do it, you took another class. So if you did an ADT, you didn't have to take it. And so, again, if there's this push against unit accumulation, even though these are valuable classes, this is valuable curriculum, we have to take a look at what the impact is on the ADT, because then we have to completely redo that. And then
unravel it.
I think it's better to wait to see what the CSU does, because if they do it and then we do it, but we haven't been in concert with one another, then we have a CID problem, a course identification number, because that means that every single course that meets the requirement in the community colleges has to get a CID number in order to meet the requirements in the Cal State system. And let me tell you, that will take 2-3 years minimum to get that through.
Actually,
So, you know, good intention, but it's not simple. It's just not a simple.
You're right.
I'll
So,
tell you, this was brought before the league boards, and I'll tell you what the vote was. So the league recommended to oppose, and the reason they recommended to oppose the Marasucci bill was because they felt that this should be up to local districts. So when it came before the league boards, the CEOs voted unanimously to support the league vote, the league recommendation. So they were going to oppose this because,
Oppose it.
but just based on local control issues.
Mhm.
The trustees, the majority of the trustees voted to go against the league's recommendation and to support Marasucci's bill. And the students, the academic student group, as well as the student trustee who sits on the board, were very vocal in supporting an ethnic studies bill because they felt even if it required an additional class, they felt it was important. So the trustees split on this. So Andy Martinez, who is now over at the league over their legislative activities, is doing a little more outreach, which I think is good. But I think, Erica, if an opportunity comes up, you should voice this among the CEOs because your group unanimously voted against it just based on
the local
control, but
control.
not really looking at the impact to the students. And the students, I think, didn't really understand what
Yeah.
those implications were. So I think, David, you'll have a chance to also talk
Yeah.
about this among the student trustees. But also, Dale said you sit on the ACL also, right, with Andy Martinez and those guys. So I
Yeah.
think that it should be we should really talk about this because I don't think it was really discussed well when Ryan proposed this out and
Yeah.
said, okay, this is how you guys should vote without
I
full
just,
discussion.
I think that the key is that the intention of it is good. It's just that the devil is in the details. And if you look at everything that has been done in this state over the last 10 years to try to get people through the pipeline, how this gets implemented is really important. And we can't lose sight of it because if we just say there's this requirement, it's going to take a long time for us to figure out what that means. And I think that's probably why the CEOs were concerned about local control because, we have, I don't know if I like 30 ADTs. We would have to take 30 ADTs through curriculum, which we can do. It's not that it's impossible, but it won't happen tomorrow. And so I just want to make sure that we focus on if we're going to do it, let's figure out how it works the best for students.
So I just pulled up the bill now and I stand corrected. It says the university shall not increase the number of units required to graduate
Oh,
from the university with a BA.
Yeah, but that's different than the number of units for GE. All that says is you can't have more than 120 units to graduate, meaning it can't be 123. But what it doesn't say is the relationship between GE, the major, and electives. So that's the key detail.
Yeah, it says the graduation requirement shall not apply to a post-baccalaureate degree student, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, we need to just look at those.
So I think this is why it's important for us to discuss these even at our level, because each of us has opportunities to discuss it among our groups. So the CEOs, I don't think really thoroughly discussed it and just kind of voted along with whatever the league recommended. I think it should be discussed among the CEOs. I don't think the trustees, they voted with the students. The students may not have known the impact. And so I think that's important. But Jim, you now sit on some of the committees at ACCT. This could be discussed over at the ACCT level, and Tony's with CSU. So it's important for us to know at the local level what this impact is so that we can express that impact at our various positions across.
Well, and I think one of the other issues, and I think we're going to face this, is that when you have this kind of requirement, what it does in some ways is it ensures that all students get that, that information, right? They get exposure.
Right.
The downside is that then faculty in other classes don't think they need to worry about really adjusting their classes and their instruction to be
Right.
more equity minded and to
Right.
bring in more perspectives. So that is another concern, is we don't want faculty in other disciplines to say, okay, it's done, don't have to worry about it now. We want all faculty to incorporate these important tenets. So that, you know.
Erica,
Erica,
that's a really good point.
Erica, I agree with you on that point, but I think it's incumbent on all of universities, colleges, et cetera. Just because there's a course doesn't mean a hall pass for every other
Absolutely, but some people will
course,
see it
that
that
we
way.
not be equity minded in all of our teaching and all of our courses.
Yeah, I think Erica makes some excellent points today, and it's
Once in a while.
and I you know that I think you're brilliant.
Thank you.
But I think this is a problem with politics, and this is a good thing that as course in ethics studies, it sounds great, but when you talk to people like Erica, who and they should be talking to people like you, there's a long process to all this, and I try, and I know a lot of our faculty, we try to talk about ethnicity in each of our core and history, and even in my book, I go to extremes, putting in issues dealing with Blacks and Hispanics, and we make a good effort, but I know there are probably some that don't, but there's a lot of things that have to be done, and Erica makes some excellent points. I don't want to increase this. It increases at the university level more money for students, and we're trying to reduce GE requirements. That's what I thought our goal was at the university, but I don't know.
I also want to just bring out that both Jim and David are now on 2 DEI workforce.
Great.
So I hope that you will also bring that perspective in when you talk to your work groups. So I'm sorry, Jim, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, that's okay. Tony, I was going to agree and support Tony's point. This, no doubt, is well-intentioned, but it's different. But in the same way, so was the parking lot for the homeless.
Right.
Well-intentioned. And just because something's well-intentioned doesn't mean the author has thought through all of the implications and that it's a really good idea. Because on the surface, it's like, oh, we need to increase ethnic studies and social justice, so this is good. But you have to think it all the way through and make sure that it really is. You have to think of the—
Or how you implement it. It's about, it's that what it is good. It is about how you implement it, and to make sure that it is in keeping with all of the other things. Or there has to be some recognition that the other things we've talked about need to shift. So unit accumulation is one of those things. If it's not an overlay and it is an extra, then we need to adjust our rhetoric around additional units.
we need
and
to
we do that, but we have to have that discussion.
We need to be going the other direction in terms of getting our students graduated and transferred, taking fewer courses, not more. What's our number, Erica, and what's our ultimate goal? I know we want to get that number down, but
we want to get the ultimate number is to get it to 60, but what the Vision for Success goal is to get students no more than 73 units. And depending on how you look at it, we're above that, but it's hard to tell because we have a lot of students who finish off what they're doing here at the college. They don't start here. So whether or not we contributed to their unit accumulation, it's not clear.
And my point isn't who contributed to it and what they took here versus there and where they graduated. My point just in general, system-wide, we should be finding ways to getting our students through in fewer courses, not more.
GE courses are very important, and
they are.
And I think because as I get old, and I'm getting old, I go back to my undergraduate courses in music appreciation and art appreciation. To me, as I travel the world, those two courses have become the most important in my life. And beginning speech is another one. And I can say now I'm thinking about ethnic studies. Maybe things will change as we get older too. About when we think about what we learned in ethnic studies, but it just at the university, it's such a fight because many in our departments are based on the number of students.
Yeah.
And some departments, this will be a windfall, you know, and is it going to be just in one department where they're going to have to hire new faculty and teach these 200 student sections, which isn't fair to the other departments? There's, as Erica's brought out, there's a lot of things that have to be thought about.
So Dale, it seems like for going forward, there's opportunity for us, where there's opportunity for us to advocate, you know what the position is, then as long as it doesn't add extra units, it doesn't impact the ADTs, you know, we need to work that out. So if there's an opportunity to then support the CSU bill and the Marsucci bill when it comes up again, I'm not sure what the issue is with the K-12s. I've actually sat in on some of theirs and I don't really know exactly what the resistance is, but.
Well, my hunch is it's because they already have the A through G requirements. And so is this now A through F requirement?
Right.
And if so, do they have the bandwidth in their existing teaching staff?
Yeah.
How are they going to make sure it gets articulated and recognized as they've met this requirement? I mean, I think it's a lot about the devil is in the details, more than it is resistance to the idea that this is an important topic. Like, I think there is general acceptance that this is a really important topic, but I think a lot of people are just scared about how to do it.
Right. How do you
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that among the K-12s, but then I've also heard some K-12 say, well, then they don't think that they need to put in a special class. They're weaving in ethnic recognition throughout all of their classes. So it's back to what you said. I mean, it's not just done with one professor teaching a class. It's now
everywhere. Yeah.
Throughout all of it's changing the culture, I guess.
And maybe that's true. The problem is that they have not been able to demonstrate it. So the question is, if you can demonstrate that that's happened, then that's the best place to be, that all of the curriculum is infused, that it is, you know, it's been evaluated to make sure that it's got, you know, that you get rid of implicit bias and you do all of these important things. So I think there's sure, we'll just add a class, or well, class isn't enough, everything needs to change. So I think that's a lot of where it comes from. You know, there's that central tension, and the ultimate goal is to make sure that that our students get the access to that kind of information, to that kind of discipline. It's really important, but how do you do it?
Okay, so we'll keep our eye on it. When do you
Yeah.
expect us to have a discussion on this again? Dale, when do you think this will come up again?
It's back on the assembly floor, so it could go down to the governor in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So
maybe next month we can get an update and see
yeah, see where it is.
Keep up on this. Okay, great.
Yeah.
What else?
Well, let's see. Before I continue, how is your time? Because it's almost 11 o'clock now.
Yeah, it's 11 o'clock. I don't know who has to.
I have another meeting at 11, but I will hold over for as long as I can.
Yeah, so how much more do we have on this?
Well, I was going to talk about one more bill on the COVID liability in higher education.
Oh, yeah.
That's
And
important.
then I just wanted to make sure that you are aware of this legislative leadership put together a stimulus package of $100 billion. That's 100 with a B billion.
Yeah.
Boy. So if I could do those two things, then
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
so on AB 1759, the solace bill, what it does is it exempts public and independent institutions of higher education from any monetary liability and damages for injury related to the COVID-19 infection. The bill was scheduled to be heard in the Senate Judiciary, but then part of that that fight that the legislature, the Senate and Assembly is having, the bill did not get scheduled yet. We think that the bill at the state level will be heard either in a trailer bill to the budget or maybe later in a special, in possibly a special session only on COVID-19, but what they're doing is they're waiting and seeing what the progress is. The committee staff in the Senate said that the bill was written too broadly, and they said it could encompass lawsuits that were filed that have nothing to do with the COVID-19 virus. So for example, if during this pandemic period, there was a sexual harassment lawsuit, or conceivably that was filed at the same time, that could be considered part of the exemption. And so they want to rewrite the bill in the Senate committee to make it clear that what is a COVID-19 kind of issue. The second thing is that there's opposition to this bill from the consumer attorneys and then from classified labor unions, SEIU and CSEA.
Yeah.
The classified labor unions, their issue is they contend that they're good, well-meaning districts, but then there are also these bad actor districts who haven't been doing anything to help them with the pandemic, that they aren't being given masks or gloves or equipment. They're not being given disinfectant to properly clean the campuses. They have a whole list of complaints and issues. So they want to try to figure out how to address that issue. The reason this is important, even though it still may not be moving at the state level, is that there's also the federal bill, the federal legislation, and Mitch McConnell has put in language that prevents any lawsuits related to COVID-19 unless it's related to gross negligence, or I forgot what the other term is, but he would only allow for his bill, and the Republican bill only provides for lawsuits in case of gross negligence, and I forgot what the other legal term is, but it was only for certain limited circumstances. And that is one of the few things that we're hearing that Mitch McConnell is even interested in remotely. Interestingly, his provision applies not just to business, but also to all public municipalities, including higher education and K-12. So it is overreaching, but it's a more narrow standard, I guess, for lack of a better term, for at the federal level. So we're going to watch this carefully, because if the legislature gets back on track, this bill is going to be one of the key bills that we want to look for. And we know this is going to be helpful to not just your district, but everyone, everyone in the community college system. So we've been keeping a close eye on it. The second thing I wanted to call your attention to is on this stimulus package. The speaker and the pro tem and the budget committee chairs, and particularly Mr. Robert Hertzberg, the senator from the LA area here, they put together this $100 billion stimulus package, and there's scant details, but
Wait a minute, with the state?
With the state, if this is the state, there is no increase in taxes on this. What they're doing is they're looking at revenue sources from special funds, and they're the term they're using is they're securitizing existing revenues out there. For example, they're looking at proposals where you as individual taxpayers and businesses, you would prepay your state income taxes and you prepay for a future year, and you would get credit for it later by prepaying paying it up front. They would take monies from different special funds and have those prepaid and loaded up front to use, and then they would purchase some kind of investment instruments to use to refinance this at a later time. What you should know about this, included in this package, is the provision of loans for students in higher education, for needy students in higher education. And then there's also a loan provision, a general loan provision for expansion of broadband for needy students, or not needy, for needy households. It doesn't necessarily specify students. So those things could potentially make you eligible for this. If this bill requires, or if this proposal requires legislation, there isn't time to finish this in this session. They would have to do a special session on this particular piece. It sounds very ambitious. I think yesterday we sent out what we had. We just had a one-page media sheet, and then there was an attachment to that. I think we forwarded, Carol of my staff might have forwarded to everyone yesterday to the district. So I just want you to be aware of it. I don't know how much play this is going to be, or how practical or how feasible this is. It's very,
that
very
sounds like a
ambitious.
nightmare.
It could
Yeah.
be.
I'm sorry, but that
Yeah.
sounds like typical Hertzberg, but it is.
Yeah.
So,
Shell game.
so
Yeah.
Jill, this probably isn't worth too much conversation, but it sounds like what he's going to do is securitize future revenue streams, taxes, whatever.
Yes.
It's a bond issue today that raises money today, but it's paid back by tax revenues in the future.
Right.
And you're borrowing from the future to pay money in the present, and then you don't have that money in the future.
You're creating another wall of debt that Jerry
Yeah,
Brown
exactly.
hated, that Jerry Brown hated. So
No.
It's another way of doing a deferral. It's a different,
Mhm.
it's different, but
Yes.
it's still, rather than face the music this year and do budget cuts, we're gonna hold you steady, but we're from an accrual basis, but on a cash basis, we're not gonna
Yeah.
hit you. And this is saying we're gonna borrow money up from future revenues to pay operations today.
Mhm.
yes.
And it really puts the pressure on in the future.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
So is there anything that we need to do? Any advocacy issues? that we-
I think this thing is, there isn't any sufficient detail to be able to react to anything other than ask more questions. So there's no mechanism to take a position on this. I think it's one of these things you really have to watch and just keep track of to see how it's going to roll out and what happens to it. So, but I
Okay.
wanted you to be aware of it because downstream obviously there's going to be some press that will emerge on this if
Oh, trust me, if Hertzberg is involved, there'll be a ton of press
Yeah.
there'll
that
be,
he's called personally.
so yeah, right,
Correct.
right. So
Okay, are there any questions on this, Tony, Jim, David?
No, I think
All right, we've been alerted. I guess we'll just have to keep our eye on it and then keep our eye on these other bills and see what
Mhm.
comes out.
yes,
Okay, so we agree then that Alex will put a resolution on the next board agenda that is to take a support position for 15 and 16, and we'll see whether or not the board approves.
Yeah. Okay.
And then Linda, you can report out from this meeting
Yeah.
at the beginning of the meeting that later on in the agenda, you see these, and just so you know, they have come to you without any sort of position from the legislative committee. And then later on, when we talk about it, you can address it a little bit more.
Okay, will do.
Okay,
All right,
all right,
we're done?
we're done.
anything
Good
else?
job.
Good to see everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
Dale.
you.
Nice to see
Stay
you. Thanks,
cool.
David.
Take care.
Yeah.
Tony,
Bye.
Good day.
Linda.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye.